Hi everyone, it's Renee with Delaney Jane Cards. Welcome back to my channel. Today is the final Growing in Unity video from me this week. Today I'm going to be doing a little colored pencil coloring, something I rarely do. I chose some chocolate cardstock here and I stamped my, I think it's just a frame on this chocolate cardstock using some ink on 3 blackout ink. And I did leave my stamp in my MISTI because at this point I was unsure if I was going to need to restamp it. So my thought here was to color this image like it was a wooden frame carved out of wood. It did evolve along the way, and I'm slow at pencil coloring. This took forever. I'm not gonna lie. It took me an entire hour to color just the frame. Just the frame. But what I did is I went around and I colored all the leaves first. I used these 4 colors and a blender pencil. And I did all the leaves. And then I decided I should probably zoom in because it would be easier. Made sure that they had a highlight like they would be carved, and then I did all of the largest flowers the same. I actually did all of the flowers the same, but I did all the largest flowers first before I moved on. At this point, I still wasn't sure that this was going to work out. I will, spoiler alert, love this card. It is so pretty and I love it so much, and I'll probably be sad when somebody else owns it. So I did all those big flowers and then I went back through and I did the little ones. And it's colored pencil so it doesn't dry, unlike Copic marker where you kind of have to work in small areas so that you can blend well. But I worked in like 1 and 2 flower increments so I didn't lose where I was, because there's a lot of swirls and layers and all sorts of craziness going on. This is like roses, and I'm not sure which artist actually drew this, but it's from a 2017 March kit of the month. I love Unity's kits. I have a few of them. I like that usually it's several different artists that get together. This kind of looks like Andrew Blum's drawing, but I don't really know. I don't think it's listed on the package. So here I had just worked my way around, and then I added some more highlight on the flowers, and where I had thought maybe I had lost some as I went around with this cream colored pencil. These are just my Prismacolors. I think I have the 48 set. This is the only colored pencils I own besides maybe some Crayolas. I don't use my colored pencils very often. They just take me a lot longer. So I had cut a mask, basically a reverse mask of this frame out of some printer paper. I stamped the image and then cut the center out because I have another video on my channel where I made a mirror and put this woman in the mirror. I wanted to do that with just Unity images, and I love this image here. I don't know what it is about her. The fact that maybe she's not looking at herself, the fact that maybe she is down on herself. But I just absolutely love this image. So I pulled out some purples and some peaches, and I just kind of started coloring here. What I did was outline it in the color that I thought the skin was going to end up, and then I filled it in with a lighter color, and then I pulled out a different one here. It just was so light that I needed some more color, so I pulled out that like lighter tan color, and I colored the actual face and left her nose, and then did a little bit of shading and colored her nose because it wouldn't be flat with the face. And this was so scary for me to color this skin and start coloring this image because I had put all that time and effort into this frame, and the last time I made a similar card I basically just stamped her in Stays on ink on some silver paper, and that was it. She didn't have any color, and I just had this idea and I really wanted to make it work. Now these colored pencils look stunning on this brown cardstock. I have colored on craft cardstock before. I've seen people color on like navy blue cardstock before. I'm not sure I've seen anybody color on like chocolate brown cardstock. I'm sure it's been done. It's not new, but this was the first time I had done it, and this is something that I will probably do again because look at that color. It's so pretty. Now I used a really light hand, and I did sharpen my pencils a lot, like so much that I think I had to dump out my pencil sharpener at least once while I was coloring. And I really liked how these looked on the chocolate cardstock. Now I probably could have used my Copic markers and I would have just had really deep tones. I couldn't have got all this blending. Definitely would have probably had to color this on white and not on chocolate brown. And at this point, the card that I end up with is still not the card that I have in my head. And I don't know, I'm sure that happens to you. You have this idea and it just kind of evolves and you end up somewhere else, with a different image or a different technique, or it just turns out very different than you had imagined, but you just absolutely love what happened with it. That's this card for me. So what I did here with her braids is I wanted her hair to be like blonde, and I pulled out my colors that I would use for blonde, and then I pulled out a lighter one and a darker one. And she's got like these messy braids on either side of her head here. So I went through and I put some lighter and some darker tones in and then went over them with the colored pencils, and it just gives me a different like color variations. And then I used my silver pencil to color in the mirror. And I know really a mirror would be whatever's reflecting in the background, but I wanted it to look like a mirror. I did have a little trouble there where her little strands of hair were sticking out, and I do end up like fixing that. In the end, it does look nicer. I do end up blending that mirror a little bit more too later. But here I die cut all my pieces. I was going to use that fabulous embossing powder there. I will have to make a video talking about that one because that one's kind of special. But I decided to emboss in white on this panel. Now these are red rubber stamps, so this is how I straighten them out. Usually I use the clear part of my MISTI and I stamp the image, and then I can wipe it off and like fix it so that it's straight. So I stamped this with Versamark ink. I did use my anti-static powder bag before I did that because this has some tiny words and I wanted to make sure that I did not screw it up. I had about, I don't know, an hour and 45 minutes of coloring into this, which I never ever spend that much time coloring something. So you could tell that I really wanted to end my Unity week with a very special project. So here I just wiped off the embossing powder, anti-static powder stuff, and then I added foam tape to the back of my brown panel. And this purple cardstock is cut with a Gina Marie die, and it is not much bigger than my panel. When I put it down, you'll just barely see the little edges peeking out. But because I used a foam tape, you can kind of see underneath the edge of the panel, and it just adds an extra little bit of dimension. And then I did frame everything with black because I did use black outline in my image, so I thought that pulled that together. And then here I am fussing with these sequins or confettis or whatever they are. And I'm still fussing with it because it's beautiful, but it is not popping off the page like I wanted. So what I did, and I should have did this before, but I took some neutral Copics very carefully around that embossed sentiment because the Copic marker will like change the color of your embossing. But I added a shadow first with this N1 or N0 around my frame. I started with a really light color because I was like, well, if it doesn't work, I can kind of blend it out with my colorless blender, make it fade into the paper, and then it wouldn't be such a big deal. But then I was like, well, it doesn't really do much, but I don't hate it. So then I pulled out my N4 because we gotta pull out a darker color to get where we want to go. I wanted it to look like a wooden frame, either carved out of or like laid on a wooden wall panel maybe. So I kept putting in the little shadow and all the little nooks and crannies, as Kathy Racusin would call it, and blended that out with my N0. I think it's N0, might be N2. It's one of the lighter N's. Anyway, I still was not satisfied, so I pulled out an even darker marker. I think this is the N5. I was feeling a little more adventurous than the N4, but I didn't want to go too far because I didn't want it to be like look black on this brown cardstock. So I added more shadow, and I still wasn't satisfied here. I pulled out an even darker marker. Like, I don't know, this wouldn't have been me. See, well, first I blended this out, and I was like, well, it's good, but it could be better. And you got to have those really dark darks in order for things to look dimensional. So, well, I blended, I think this is my N0, blended out the shadow even more here. And I was just trying to make this look like I wanted it to look. This card had already evolved so much. I had actually planned on like fussy cutting it and everything, but that's not what happened. So here is the N7, which is a much darker marker. And I just put it in some very tiny areas just to add that really deep depth in the nooks and crannies, to make sure that I got the dimension that I wanted out of this. I was really careful not to run my markers over the colored pencil, because I don't think that you're supposed to do that. I think you're supposed to go the other way, like colored pencils over Copics, but not Copics over colored pencil. I think the wax is probably bad for the nibs, but hey, your stuff, you do you, boo. So here then I blended it all back out, and I was definitely liking the dimension that I was getting so much more. It definitely came to life with that shadow. It popped off that background. All that coloring that I did, that was a lot of coloring. I actually took that wreath to my husband when I was about halfway done, and I was like, is this worth it? Should I keep going? Because I don't know. Does it look good? So I wasn't sure. But anyway, with all that coloring and all that time spent, I wanted this to be exactly what I wanted. And that shadow definitely helps so much. So here I was playing with those confetti again. I wanted to use the purple. I wanted to scatter them everywhere, and really this card was kind of about restraint. There's no real layers. There's no card sketch used. There's no die cuts used. Even my embossed sentiment is embossed right on my main panel. So what I did is used 3 of these little purple confettis, and I placed them so that they highlighted my sentiment. That's all I did. So here you can see some still shots of my card. You can see where that little purple peeks out. You can get a good look at that drop shadow. Here's where I highlighted my sentiment. And I really love how this card turned out. Now, if you're watching this card the week of October 21st through October 25th, make sure you click on my coordinating blog post and leave a comment on that blog post for a chance to win some goodies from Unity. Definitely check out Unity's site. Totally worth it. And I'd love to talk to you in the comments about this card and any other card. And as always, give cards generously. Thanks for stopping by.